The moon was a traitor. It hung full and heavy over the scrubland, painting the desert floor in shades of bone and charcoal, leaving no shadow deep enough to hide a woman running for her life. Elena Reyes did not run with grace. She ran with a desperate, lung-tearing jaggedness, her boots skidding on loose shale, the hem of her torn skirt snagging on mesquite thorns that hooked into the fabric like claws. She could hear them behind her. They were not close. Not yet, but sound carried across the basin in the cool night air. She heard the heavy thud of hoofbeats and the shouting of men who were angry in the way men get when a possession decides to walk away. They did not call her by her name. They called out descriptions of what they would do when they caught her, and they called out to her as if she were a stray mare that had broken a fence. "Bring her back," one voice shouted, carried on a gust of wind. "She belongs to the boss." Elena scrambled up the side of a dry wash, her fingernails tearing against the dirt. A sharp pain shot through her left ankle, but she bit down on her lip until she tasted copper. Stopping was not a choice. Stopping was a death that would last for years. She crested the ridge and threw herself flat against the earth behind a cluster of yucca, her chest heaving against the hard ground. Below, 3 riders swept past in the moonlight, their torches casting long, violent shadows against the canyon walls. They were looking for movement, for the flash of a skirt or the white of a frightened face. Elena pressed her forehead into the dirt and closed her eyes, praying to a God she had stopped believing in months ago. She prayed for clouds. She prayed for silence. The riders slowed, their horses chuffing and stamping. "She cannot have gone far," one man said. His voice was thick with whiskey and bad intent. "She has got no water and no horse." Another answered, "The desert will catch her for us. Let us circle back to the ridge. They turned their mounts." Elena lay frozen until the vibrations of the hooves faded into the vast, echoing dark. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. The air in her throat felt like swallowed glass. She looked at her feet. Her boots were worn through at the toes, and she could feel the sticky wetness of blood inside the leather. But she stood up. She turned her back on the mining town, on the lights that flickered like false promises in the distance, and she walked into the black emptiness of the territory. Dawn brought no mercy. The sun rose not as a warming friend, but as a hammer, striking the anvil of the high desert until the air shimmered with heat. The landscape was vast and indifferent, a sprawling ocean of sagebrush and red dust that cared nothing for her fear. Vultures began to circle high above, black specks riding the thermals, patient and knowing. Elena walked until her shadow was a puddle beneath her feet, then walked until it stretched long and thin ahead of her. Her mouth was dry as parchment. Her tongue felt too large for her jaw. She thought of the water barrel behind the saloon in the town she had fled, the way the water rippled cool and dark when the ladle broke the surface. The memory was a torture. By the second day, the fear of the men behind her had been replaced by the fear of the land itself. The silence was absolute, broken only by the dry rattle of cicadas and the sound of her own uneven breathing. She found the seep in the late afternoon. It was hardly a spring, just a muddy depression under the overhang of a sandstone bluff where the earth wept a slow, brown tear. Animals had been there. The mud was churned with hoofprints and scat. Elena did not care. She fell to her knees, disregarding the sharp rocks that tore at her dress, and cupped her hands. The water smelled of sulfur and rot. She knew, with the detached logic of a doctor, that it could sicken her. It could kill her with fever within days. She drank it anyway. She scooped the sludge into her mouth, swallowing grit and slime, desperate for the moisture. She wiped her mouth with a trembling hand and leaned back against the red rock. Closing her eyes, "You keep going," she whispered to herself. Her voice was a croak, unrecognizable. "You keep going or you die." She forced herself up. The horizon was a blur of heat haze. She walked for another hour, her steps becoming erratic stumbles. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her. The sky turned a sickly shade of violet. She saw a fence line in the distance, a string of barbed wire strung between crooked posts, marking a boundary that civilized men respected. To Elena, It looked like the edge of the world. She reached for the nearest post, intending to lean against it, but her hand grasped only air. The ground rushed up to meet her face, and the world went black. The sound of a horse snorting woke her. It was a loud, wet sound, followed by the crunch of heavy boots on gravel. Elena scrambled backward in the dirt, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She pushed herself up on her elbows, her vision swimming. A man sat atop a large bay horse 10 feet away. He was silhouetted against the blinding morning sun, a dark shape with a rifle resting across his saddle horn. He was not aiming it at her, but his hand was on the grip, his finger resting along the trigger guard. He dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and wearing a duster coat that had seen more dust than rain. He wore a flat-brimmed hat pulled low, shadowing his eyes. Elena tried to stand, but her legs refused to hold her. She collapsed back onto the grit, gasping, "Please," she rasped. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I have nothing." The man walked closer, stopping a respectful distance away. He did not smile. He did not leer. He looked at her with eyes the color of flint, hard, careful, and utterly unreadable. He scanned the horizon behind her, then looked back at her face. "Name," he said. It was not a demand, just a requirement. "Elena," she said. "Elena Reyes." He nodded once, as if checking the name against a list in his head and finding it blank. "Anyone following you?" Elena hesitated. The truth was a dangerous thing to hand a stranger. If she told him she was property of the mine boss, he might return her for a reward. If she told him she was a criminal, he might shoot her. But she could not look at this man and invent a complete lie. She did not have the strength for it. "I am looking for honest work," she said, the words stumbling out. "I got into trouble back east a ways." She did not say what kind of trouble. She did not say she had broken a bottle over a man's head when he tried to force her into a room she did not want to enter. She did not say the sheriff had laughed when she showed him her bruises. The man watched her for a long moment. He seemed to be weighing her soul, or perhaps just her utility. He looked at her bleeding feet, the hollows of her cheeks, the way her hands shook in the dirt. "My name is Noah Kincaid," he said finally. He reached for the canteen on his saddle and tossed it to her. It landed with a soft thud near her knees. "Drink slow. If you throw it up, I am not giving you more." Elena uncorked the canteen with fumbling fingers and drank. The water was warm and tasted of tin, but it was the sweetest thing she had ever known. She forced herself to stop after 3 swallows, clutching the metal flask to her chest. "Get up," Noah said. Elena managed to stand, swaying. Noah did not offer a hand to steady her. He watched her struggle, his face impassive. When she was upright, he mounted his horse and gestured with his chin toward the south. "My place is 3 miles that way. You can walk, or you can stay here and feed the buzzards." "I will walk," Elena said. She walked. It took them an hour, with Noah riding at a slow pace, letting the horse pick its way through the scrub while Elena trailed behind, focusing on the rhythmic sway of the horse's tail to keep herself moving. The ranch house appeared out of a fold in the land like a secret. It was not a grand hacienda. It was a low, weather-worn structure made of timber and adobe, hunkered down against the wind. A barn stood to the west, its wood bleached silver by the sun. A corral held 2 other horses and a milk cow. But what drew Elena's eye was the small rise just beyond the house. A low iron fence surrounded 2 mounds of earth. 2 wooden markers stood there, gray and silent against the vast blue sky. They explained the silence of the place better than words ever could. Noah dismounted at the barn and began to unsaddle his horse. He did not invite her into the main house. "There is food in the kitchen," he said, pointing to the back door of the main building. "Beans and cornbread. Eat. Then come to the tack room off the barn. That is where you will sleep." Elena looked at the main house, then at the barn. The separation was deliberate. He was drawing a line in the dirt. He was a man living alone, and she was a stray woman with no history he could trust. He was protecting his reputation, Or perhaps he was protecting himself from the complication of her presence. "Thank you," she said. She ate standing up in the kitchen, devouring the cold beans from the pot with a spoon she found on the counter. The house was painfully neat. There was no dust on the table. The curtains were plain muslin, tied back with twine. It felt like a house that was holding its breath. When she went to the tack room, she found a narrow cot pushed against the wall, surrounded by the smell of leather, saddle soap, and grain. It was clean. There was a heavy bolt on the inside of the door. Elena stared at the bolt, a lock she could control. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and sudden, but she blinked them away. She would not cry. Crying made you weak, and weak things did not survive the desert. Noah appeared in the doorway, blocking the light. He held a bundle of cloth, a clean flannel shirt, and a pair of denim trousers that looked like they would be too big for her. "Wash your clothes," he said. "You can wear these until they dry." He placed the clothes on a barrel. He did not step inside the room. "We have rules," Noah said, his voice flat. "You work for your keep. I pay fair wages for fair work. You do not bring trouble to my door. If men with guns come looking for you, you tell me before they get here, not after." Elena nodded quickly. "Yes, I understand. And if you want to leave," he added, looking her dead in the eye, "I will not stop you. You are not a prisoner here." "I do not want to leave," Elena said. The words came out before she could check them. "Good," Noah said. "Rest today. You start at sunrise." The first week was a blur of exhaustion and wary observation. Elena worked as if her life depended on every swept floor and every scrubbed pot. She hauled water from the well until her hands were blistered and raw. She chopped wood, though her swing was clumsy at first, until she learned to let the axe head do the work. She cooked beans and salt pork, seasoning them with the wild sage she found growing near the creek bed, trying to make the meager rations taste like a home. She flinched constantly. If Noah dropped a piece of firewood, Elena jumped. If he walked into a room too quietly, she spun around, her eyes wide and terrified, hands coming up as if to ward off a blow. "I am sorry," she would say, breathless. "I did not hear you. I am sorry." Noah never commented on her fear. He simply adjusted. He began to scuff his boots when he approached the house. He stopped slamming the door. He treated her like a skittish colt that needed to be gentled, not with touch, but with space. One afternoon, a rider approached from the east. Elena was hanging laundry on the line, the wind whipping the wet sheets around her legs. She saw the man coming and froze, her knuckles white as she gripped a clothespin. It was not the men from the mine. It was a cowboy from the neighboring spread, a man with a jagged scar running down his chin and eyes that roved over Elena with open, hungry curiosity. He rode right up to the clothesline, leaning forward in his saddle. "Well now," he said, grinning. "I did not know Noah had gone and got himself a woman. You are a pretty little thing to be out here in the desolate middle of nowhere." Elena took a step back, the wet sheet acting as a flimsy shield. "I work here," she said, her voice tight. "Work, is it?" The man laughed. "I bet you do. Does old Noah pay you in coin or in kindness?" Elena felt the heat rise in her cheeks, a mix of shame and fury. Noah stepped out of the barn. He did not have his rifle, but he held a pitchfork in one hand. He walked over with that slow, rolling gait, stopping between Elena and the rider. "Afternoon. Silas," Noah said. Silas straightened in his saddle, his grin fading a fraction. "Just being neighborly. Noah, I saw you had company." "She is not company," Noah said. His voice was low, devoid of anger but heavy with warning. "She is help. She is here to work." Silas looked from Noah to Elena, then spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust near Elena's feet. "A man living alone with a woman like this. People talk. Noah, you know that. Let them talk," Noah said. "You got business." "Silas?" Silas tipped his hat mockingly to Elena. "Just passing through." He wheeled his horse and galloped away, kicking up a cloud of grit. Elena stood trembling by the sheets. Noah watched the rider disappear over the rise before turning to her. "Pay him no mind," Noah said. "Silas has a mouth bigger than his brain." "They think I am a whore," Elena said. The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Noah looked at her. He did not rush to reassure her. He did not offer empty platitudes. "I do not care what they think," he said. "I care if the fences get mended and the cattle get fed. Go inside. Elena, the wind is picking up." That night, Elena could not sleep. The wind was howling around the eaves of the tack room. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and cracked the door open to look at the night sky. She saw Noah standing on the rise, by the 2 graves. The moonlight turned him into a statue. He was hatless, his head bowed. She strained to hear. He was speaking, his voice carrying on the wind, low and murmuring. It was not the rhythmic cadence of the Lord's Prayer or the 23rd Psalm. It was a conversation. "I am trying. Mary," she heard him say, "I am trying to keep it running. It is hard without you. The silence is loud." Elena closed the door softly, her heart aching with a pain that was not her own. He sounded like a man apologizing for being alive. 3 days later, the sky turned the color of a fresh bruise. The air went still, heavy and suffocating, and the birds stopped singing. "Dust storm," Noah said, looking up from the corral fence he was repairing. "Get the shutters closed on the house. Fill the troughs. It is going to be a bad one." Elena ran. She latched the heavy wooden shutters on the main house, then the barn. By the time she finished, the wall of dust was visible on the horizon, a towering, seething monster of red earth swallowing the world. Noah was on his horse, shouting over the rising wind. "The calves! They will scatter if we do not bunch them in the canyon box." Elena did not know how to ride well, but she knew how to listen. She grabbed a hackamore and threw it over the old mare in the corral. Dragging herself up onto the bare back, "Follow me!" Noah yelled. They rode into the teeth of the storm. The wind hit them like a physical blow, screaming in their ears. The sand scoured Elena's skin, stinging her face and hands. She pulled her scarf up over her nose and mouth. Squinting against the grit, the cattle were bawling, huddled in confused knots in the sagebrush. Noah was a shadow in the swirling dust, whistling and shouting, driving them toward the narrow box canyon where the rock walls would offer shelter. Elena rode the flank. A calf broke away, panicked and bleeding, running blindly toward the open desert. Without thinking, Elena kicked the mare into a gallop. She cut the calf off, waving her arms, screaming through her scarf. The mare turned sharply, and Elena nearly slid off, gripping the mane with desperate strength. She turned the calf back, driving it into the herd. For 2 hours they fought the wind. The world was nothing but noise and brown darkness. Elena's eyes burned. Her throat was caked with mud, but she did not stop. She pushed the stragglers. She held the line. She became a creature of pure will. When the last steer was in the canyon and the brush gate was pulled across, the storm was at its peak. They rode back to the barn, blindly trusting the horses to find the way. Inside the barn, the air was still thick with dust, but the wind was a dull roar outside. Elena slid from the horse and her legs collapsed. She sat hard on the straw-covered floor, coughing, her chest heaving. Noah slid down beside her. He was covered in red dust, his eyebrows and eyelashes coated, making him look like a ghost. He took a canteen and handed it to her first. "Drink," he said. Elena drank, the water turning the mud in her mouth to clay. She handed it back. "You ride good enough," Noah said. He wiped his face with a bandana, revealing the pale skin around his eyes. "You kept your head. Most greenhorns would have panicked. I have run through worse than wind," Elena said. Noah looked at her. For the first time, the hardness in his eyes softened. Just a fraction. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. He counted out coins, silver dollars and quarters. $5, he said, placing the stack on a crate between them. "That is for the week." Elena looked at the money. It was more than she had seen in a year. And Noah continued, looking at his boots. "I am going to need help through the winter. The herd is growing. I cannot do it alone. If you want the job, it is yours. Same pay. Room and board. Elena looked at the silver. She looked at the man who spoke to graves and defended her honor without knowing her story. She thought of the road south, the long empty miles to Mexico, the running that never ended. She was tired. She was so incredibly tired of being a rabbit in a world of wolves. I will stay, Elena said. Her voice was steady. Noah nodded, as if he had expected nothing else, or perhaps as if he had hoped for nothing else. Good, he said. We have got fences to check when this wind dies down. He stood up and walked toward the barn door to check the latch, leaving Elena sitting in the straw, the silver coins glinting dully in the dim light, listening to the storm rage against the walls that were, for now, strong enough to hold it back. The wagon ride into town was a study in silence. The wooden wheels groaned against the hard-packed ruts of the road, a rhythmic complaint that seemed to echo the tightness in Elena's chest. She sat on the bench seat beside Noah, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white ridges against her skin. She wore a dress Noah had found in an old trunk in the attic, a plain calico thing with a high collar and long sleeves that smelled faintly of cedar and long-ago lavender. It was a decent dress, respectable and modest, but Elena felt as though she were wearing a costume that did not quite fit the woman she had become. Noah drove with his usual economy of motion, the reins loose in his large, calloused hands. He did not look at her, but he did not look away from her either. He simply watched the road, his eyes scanning the horizon for hawks or weather or trouble. Keep your head up, Noah said, his voice cutting through the grinding of the wheels. You have done no wrong on this land. Elena lifted her chin a fraction, but she could not stop her eyes from darting toward the cluster of buildings rising from the dust ahead. The town of Clearwater was not large, a main street of false-fronted buildings, a livery, a church with a peeling white steeple, and enough saloons to keep the devil busy on a Saturday night. To Elena, it looked like a trap. They rolled onto the main street just as the noon sun was beating the shadows into submission. The street was crowded. Men stood on boardwalks, leaning against posts, whittling or smoking or just watching the world go by with the bored, hungry eyes of predators. As the wagon passed, conversation stalled. Heads turned. Elena felt the weight of their gazes like physical touches, heavy and unwelcome. She stared at the backs of the horses, refusing to meet any eye, but she could hear them. The tone of the town changed as they passed. It went from the low hum of commerce to a sharp, murmuring buzz. Noah pulled the wagon up in front of the mercantile and set the brake. He stepped down and walked around to her side, offering a hand. Elena took it. His grip was dry and firm, an anchor in a shifting sea. Stay close, he said quietly. They entered the mercantile, a cavernous space smelling of coffee beans, leather, and sawdust. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles named Mr. Henderson, was weighing sacks of flour for a woman in a bonnet. He looked up with a professional smile that faltered the moment it landed on Elena. The rumors had traveled faster than the wind. Elena could see the recognition in his eyes, the slight widening, the quick, judgmental flicker that assessed her value and found it lacking. He looked from her to Noah, and his face settled into a mask of stiff, cold politeness. Mr. Kincaid, the clerk said, nodding to Noah. I did not expect to see you until the snow flew. We needed salt and coffee, Noah said, and the lady needs boots. The clerk's eyes slid to Elena, then away, as if looking at her directly might stain his spectacles. The lady, he repeated, the word tasting sour in his mouth. Elena stepped back, trying to shrink herself into the shadow of a stack of grain sacks. She heard the whispers from the back of the store, where two women were sorting through bolts of fabric. That is her, one whispered. The one from the mining camp. I heard she killed a man. The other murmured back, I heard she stole a payroll. I heard she was the sheriff's favorite until she got too old. The stories twisted and warped, each one uglier than the last, painting a portrait of a monster or a whore. leaving no room for the terrified girl who had walked across a desert to survive. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to run. She wanted to dissolve into the floorboards. Noah did not turn around. He did not shout. He simply placed his hands on the counter, leaning forward just enough to occupy the clerk's entire field of vision. He waited. He stood there, a solid wall of silence, until the whispering in the back of the room died away into an uncomfortable hush. "Boots," Noah said again, his voice even and calm. "Size 6, sturdy." The clerk swallowed hard. "Yes, of course, right this way." Noah stayed beside her while she tried them on. He did not let her sit alone. When the clerk tried to hand the wrapped parcel to Elena without touching her hand, Noah intercepted it. He paid in gold coin, placing the money on the counter with a deliberate click. "Good day, Mr. Henderson," Noah said. The clerk muttered something indistinguishable. Noah guided Elena out, his hand hovering near the small of her back, not touching but guarding. They walked to the livery stable next to check on a replacement buckle for the harness. The air here was thicker, smelling of manure and hot iron. A group of men were gathered near the corral, passing a bottle in a brown paper sack. Among them was a man Elena recognized by type, if not by name, big, red-faced, with the confident swagger of a man who has never been hit hard enough to learn manners. His name was Jeb, and he was the sort who mistook cruelty for wit. "Well, look at this," Jeb said, stepping away from the fence. "Noah Kincaid brought his new pet to town." The other men laughed, a low, ugly sound. Elena froze. Jeb took a step closer, his eyes raking over Elena's plain dress. "You clean up all right, darling, but I bet you look better with a little dust on your knees. Don't you? Used to it." "I reckon." Noah stopped. He turned slowly to face the man. He did not raise his voice. He did not puff out his chest. He stood with his arms loose at his sides, his face completely devoid of expression. "That is enough." "Jeb," Noah said. Jeb grinned, emboldened by his audience. "Or what? Kincaid, you gonna preach at me?" "I'm just saying. We all know what she is. No point putting a church dress on a—" Noah stepped forward. He moved only 2 feet, but the shift in the air was sudden and violent. He entered Jeb's personal space, crossing the invisible line that civilized men kept between them. Noah looked Jeb in the eye, and for the first time, Elena saw the darkness that lived inside the rancher's quiet demeanor. It was not a hot anger. It was a cold, absolute resolve. "Finish that sentence," Noah said softly, "and I will make sure you do not speak another one for a long time." Jeb's grin faltered. He looked at Noah's hands, then up at his eyes. He looked for fear, and found none. He looked for hesitation, and found stone. The laughter from the other men died out. Jeb took a half-step back, holding up his hands, just having some fun. "Noah, no need to get riled. Back away," Noah said. Jeb backed away. He muttered something under his breath and turned back to his friends, trying to salvage his pride with a shrug. But the confrontation was over. The town had seen it. Noah Kincaid had drawn a line. "Come on," Noah said to Elena. "We are done here." The ride back to the ranch was darker than the ride in. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. Elena stared at her new boots, the leather stiff and unyielding. "I cannot stay," she said. She spoke the words to the dashboard of the wagon. Noah did not turn his head. "Why?" he asked. "You saw them," Elena said, her voice shaking. "You heard them. They will stop trading with you. They will spit on you because you have me under your roof. I am a poison. Noah, I will cost you your business." Noah clucked to the horses, urging them up the final rise toward the ranch gate. "Business comes and goes," he said. "Prices go up, prices go down. Drought comes, or the market drops. That is the way of things." He pulled the wagon to a halt in front of the barn and set the brake. He turned on the seat to look at her, the twilight casting deep shadows across his face. But people who work hard, people who are honest and keep their word, those are rare. Elena, I would rather have a good hand who helps me keep this land than the good opinion of a man like Jeb. Elena looked at him, searching for the lie, but she found only the same flat honesty he gave to everything. Get the flour inside, Noah said, climbing down. It smells like rain. The rain did not come as a gentle shower. It came as a monsoon, a violent upheaval of the atmosphere that arrived 3 weeks later. The sky turned a terrifying shade of green in the afternoon, and the clouds stacked up like mountains of bruised iron. When the heavens opened, it was as if a dam had broken in the sky. Water fell in sheets so thick it was impossible to see the barn from the house. The dry washes, which had been empty tracts of sand for months, became roaring rivers of brown water, tearing away brush and rocks. Noah burst into the kitchen, water streaming from the brim of his hat. "The south fence is down at the creek crossing," he shouted over the roar of the rain on the tin roof. "The yearling calves are on the wrong side. If the water rises any more, they will be swept into the river." Elena did not ask what he needed. She grabbed her coat. "I am coming. It is bad out there," Noah warned. "I am coming," she repeated. They rode out into a world that had been turned to mud and noise. The thunder was constant, a rolling artillery barrage that shook the ground. Every crack of lightning made Elena flinch, her heart stuttering in her chest. The sound was too much like gunfire. It brought back the memory of a door being kicked in, of a pistol shot in a small room, of the chaos of the night she had fled. But she clamped her teeth together and kicked her horse forward. They found the break in the fence. The creek was a torrent, churning white and brown. 3 calves were stranded on a spit of land that was rapidly disappearing under the rising flood. Noah uncoiled his rope. "I am going across. You keep the line tight if I go down." He plunged his horse into the water. Elena watched, terrified, as the current grabbed the animal, slewing it sideways. Noah fought the water, his face grim, urging the horse onto the spit. He roped the first calf and dragged it back through the water, the animal bawling and thrashing. By the time he went back for the second, the thunder was directly overhead. A crack of lightning struck a cottonwood tree 50 yards away, exploding it in a shower of sparks and wood. Elena screamed, ducking her head, her hands flying up to cover her ears. Her horse panicked, rearing up in the slick mud. "Elena!" Noah's voice cut through the storm. "Hold him! You have to hold him!" Elena forced her hands down. She grabbed the reins. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered, her vision blurring with tears and rain. She saw Noah on the far bank, struggling with the last calf. He was looking at her. He saw her terror. He saw the way she was curling in on herself. But he needed her. She took a breath that was more water than air. She hauled on the reins, turning her horse, forcing it to stand its ground. She waited until Noah was in the water. Then she spurred her horse forward to catch the rope he tossed, taking the strain, helping him haul the final calf to the safety of the high ground. They rode back in the driving rain, soaked to the bone, shivering and exhausted. When they reached the barn, they stripped the saddles off with numb fingers. The thunder was still rolling, but it was distant now. Noah hung his tack on the wall and turned to look at her. Elena was standing by the stall door, leaning her forehead against the rough wood, trembling uncontrollably. He walked over to her. He did not touch her. He stopped 3 feet away, giving her room to breathe. "You did good," he said softly. Elena wiped her face, smearing mud across her cheek. "I was afraid." "I know," Noah said. "I saw. That is why you did good. Being brave does not mean you are not scared. Elena, it just means you do the job anyway." He moved toward the grain bin, but he moved slowly, scuffing his boot on the floorboards to let her know he was coming. "I am going to feed the horses," he said, announcing his intention clearly. "Then we will go dry off." From that day on, Elena noticed the change. Noah never walked up behind her without speaking first. If he had to reach past her for a tool, he would say, "On your left," before he moved. He made himself predictable. He made himself safe. The evenings became their refuge. The rain had greened the grass, and the ranch settled into a rhythm of hard work and quiet nights. They sat at the small kitchen table, the lantern light casting a warm glow over the simple meals Elena prepared. Food was not plentiful. The supply run had been modest, and Noah was saving every coin for the winter feed. They ate beans, cornbread, and occasionally rabbit stew if Noah had luck with his traps. One night, over a plate of stew, Noah pushed a piece of bread around his plate. She liked this time of year, he said. It was the first time he had spoken of her without Elena asking. "Your wife?" Elena asked gently. Noah nodded. "Sarah. She loved the smell of the sage after the rain. She made this house feel full." He looked at the empty chair opposite him, then at Elena. It was the fever. 2 years ago. It took her in 3 days. The baby, our son, he only lived a day after her. I buried them on the hill so they could see the sunrise. Elena watched his hands. They were strong hands, capable of breaking horses and building fences, but they looked helpless as they rested on the table. "Why did you stay?" she asked. "Stubbornness," Noah admitted. "I did not have enough hope left to leave. I just kept working because stopping felt like dying." He looked up at her, his eyes searching her face. "You have no people? No family back east?" Elena looked down at her hands. "I had a brother," she said. Her voice went flat, draining of all emotion. It was a defense mechanism, a way to tell the facts without feeling the wound. He died in a mine collapse 4 years ago. After that, there was no one, just me. She did not say that after her brother died, the protection he had provided vanished. She did not say that the mine boss had decided a grieving girl was an opportunity. She left the silence to speak for her. Noah nodded. He did not press for more. He picked up the bread basket and offered it to her. "Eat," he said. "You are too thin." As the weeks passed, Elena began to find pieces of herself she thought she had lost. She learned the ranch not as a prisoner, but as a partner. She learned to knead dough with a rhythm that soothed her mind. She learned to clean a wire cut on a horse's leg with warm water and carbolic acid, her hands steady and sure. She fixed the garden gate that had dragged in the dirt for years, sanding the wood until it swung silent and true. She began to feel, for the first time in forever, that she was competent, that she was useful. Then the stranger came. Elena was in the vegetable patch, pulling weeds from around the struggling squash plants. She stood up to stretch her back and saw him, a single rider on the ridgeline to the north. He was not on the road. He was sitting still, watching the house through a pair of field glasses. The blood rushed from Elena's head. She dropped her hoe. The world tilted. It was them. It had to be them. She ran to the barn where Noah was shoeing the mare. "Noah!" she gasped. He dropped the hoof and straightened immediately, a hammer in his hand. "What is it? There is a man," she whispered. "On the ridge, watching." Noah moved instantly. He grabbed his rifle from the scabbard on the wall and moved to the barn door, keeping to the shadows. He scanned the ridge. "I see him," Noah said. "He does not look like a drifter. That horse is too well fed." "He is looking for me," Elena said. She was shaking again, the old terror clawing at her throat. "I think he is a scout." Noah looked at her. "Who are they?" "Elena, you said you got into trouble. You never said you were hunted." "Bad men," Elena said. The words felt childish, inadequate, but she could not force the full horror of her story past her lips. "Powerful men. They think I belong to them." Noah's jaw tightened until a muscle jumped in his cheek. He looked back at the ridge. The rider turned his horse and disappeared down the other side, vanishing as quickly as he had appeared. Noah did not yell. He did not demand she pack her bags. "Go inside the house," he said. "Stay away from the windows." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to clean my other rifle," Noah said. "And I am going to sleep in the barn tonight. No one comes up that road without me knowing it." The threat hung over the ranch like a storm cloud that refused to break. Noah checked the perimeter fences every morning. He kept his horse saddled. He slept with one eye open, but life had to continue. On Sunday, they went to town for church. It was Noah's idea. He said hiding would only make them look guilty. Elena wore her plain dress and kept her head down. After the service, As the congregation spilled out onto the dusty steps, the preacher's wife approached them. Mrs. Gable was a round woman with a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. Mr. Kincaid, she said, ignoring Elena at first. It is good to see you in the Lord's house. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, Noah said. And this must be the... Help, she said, turning her gaze on Elena. Her eyes were sharp, dissecting Elena's appearance for flaws. This is Elena, Noah said. Mrs. Gable sniffed. I have been thinking. Mr. Kincaid, it is hardly proper for a single woman to be living out there alone with a widower. People talk. I have a need for a laundress at the parsonage. It is hard work, but it is honest. It might help. Restore her reputation. Make her respectable. Elena felt a flicker of hope. A job in town. A chance to be seen as something other than a scandal. She looked up, about to speak, but Mrs. Gable was looking past her, at a group of women whispering by the gate. One of them leaned in and whispered something to Mrs. Gable, gesturing toward Elena. Mrs. Gable's face stiffened. Oh, she said. Oh, I see. She turned back to Elena, her smile vanishing entirely. On second thought, she said cold and sharp, I believe the position has been filled. We cannot have certain influences in the parsonage. The children. You understand. She turned her back and walked away. The rejection hit Elena harder than Jeb's crude words. Jeb was a brute. His cruelty was expected. This was kindness offered and then snatched away. A judgment delivered by the people who claimed to serve a God of mercy. It confirmed her deepest fear, that she was stained, permanently and visibly. Elena walked back to the wagon with her head high, but inside, she was bleeding. They drove home in silence. When they reached the ranch, Elena went straight to her room to change. She came out to find Noah in the kitchen. He had put a plate on the table for her. It was piled high with the last of the salted beef and an extra portion of cornbread. He did not say, "Forget them." He did not say, "You are a good person." He simply gave her the best of what he had, a silent offering of sustenance in a world that wanted to starve her spirit. That evening, the cold crept in. It was the first true chill of autumn, a sharp bite in the air that warned of winter. Elena sat on the porch steps, wrapped in her shawl, watching the sun die behind the mountains. The exhaustion finally overtook her. It was not physical tiredness. It was the weight of the vigilance, the shame, the constant effort of trying to be human in a world that saw her as a thing. She broke quietly. There were no sobbing heaves, just tears that leaked from her eyes and tracked hot paths down her cold cheeks. She hugged her knees to her chest, rocking slightly. The screen door creaked. Noah stepped out. He saw her shoulders shaking. He did not retreat. He walked over and sat down on the step beside her. He did not touch her. He sat close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his arm. A solid presence in the dusk. He let her cry. He did not hush her. He did not tell her to be strong. He simply bore witness to her pain. After a long time, Elena wiped her face with the rough wool of her shawl. Her voice was a broken whisper. I don't want to be what they say I am, she said. I don't want to be a story they tell to scare their daughters. Noah looked out at the darkening land, at the fences he had built and the graves he tended. Then don't be, he said. His voice was low and certain, like the earth itself. He turned to look at her, his face illuminated by the rising moon. Not here, he said. Here, you are just Elena, and that is enough. Elena looked at him, and for the first time, she believed him. She was not safe from the world, but here, on these steps, beside this quiet man, she was safe from the lie. Winter arrived early that year, dropping onto the high plains like a heavy woolen blanket soaked in ice water. The wind shifted from the dry, dusty gusts of autumn to a razor-edged gale that cut across the open country without mercy. It was a wind that sought out every crack in a window frame and every gap in a coat, stripping the heat from the land and turning the sky into a hard, colorless expanse of iron gray. Noah and Elena were 5 miles from the main house when the weather turned. They had been checking the drift fences along the northern ridge, ensuring the wire would hold against the pressure of snow and wandering herds. The morning had begun cold but clear, yet by noon, the horizon had vanished behind a wall of white that moved with terrifying speed. "We have to make for the line camp," Noah shouted over the rising howl. "We will never make the ranch house before this hits." Elena did not argue. She had learned enough about this country to know that arguing with the weather was a method of suicide. They turned their horses toward a shallow canyon where a small sod-roofed cabin sat hunkered against a rock wall, built for exactly this kind of emergency. The snow hit them before they reached the door. It was not soft, falling flakes. It was horizontal pellets of ice that stung the skin like birdshot. They stabled the horses in the lean-to, Noah working with frantic efficiency to get the animals covered and fed from the small stockpile of hay, while Elena fought the cabin door open against the wind. Inside, the air was stale and freezing, smelling of old wood smoke and dust. Noah followed her in, slamming the door and dropping the heavy wooden bar into place. The sudden silence was shocking. Outside, the wind screamed like a dying thing, but inside, there was only the sound of their heavy breathing and the creak of the timber walls. "Get the fire started," Noah said, moving to check the small supply of firewood stacked in the corner. "I will check the chinking." They worked in the dim light, driven by the primal need for heat. When the fire finally caught in the stone hearth, casting a flickering orange glow across the room, the tension in Elena's shoulders began to unspool. The cabin was small, just a single room with 2 bunks built into the wall, a table, and the fireplace. It was a space that forced proximity. There was nowhere to look but at each other. As the hours stretched on and the storm buried the world outside, the silence between them changed. It shifted from the comfortable quiet of shared work to a heavier, charged atmosphere. The firelight played over Noah's face, highlighting the lines of fatigue around his eyes and the graying hair at his temples. He sat on a crate, oiling his rifle, his hands moving with rhythmic, soothing repetition. Elena sat on the edge of the lower bunk, wrapping a wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. The isolation felt like a confession booth. The world was gone. There was only this room and this man who had given her a life without asking for her history. But the history was there, sitting between them like a ghost. "Noah," she said. Her voice was small, barely audible over the crackle of the wood. He looked up, his hands pausing on the rifle stock. "Yes? You never asked me what kind of trouble I was in." "Not really. I figured you would tell me when you were ready," Noah said. "Or you would not. It did not change the way you swing a hammer." "It matters," Elena said. She looked into the fire, unable to meet his eyes. "It matters because they might come back, and you need to know what you are standing between." Noah set the rifle down. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I am listening." Elena took a breath that shuddered in her chest. It was not just one man, Noah. It was a town. It was a system. She began to speak, haltingly at first, then with a rush of words that had been dammed up for years. She told him about the mining town, but she did not paint herself as a fallen woman seeking pity. She described the trap. She told him how the company store extended credit that could never be repaid, how the boarding house charged for sheets that were never washed, and how the debts were transferred from the mine boss to the saloon keeper to the sheriff. "It was not a choice," she said, her voice hard and brittle. "It was a ledger. They wrote my name in a book and decided how much I cost. And when I tried to leave, the sheriff, he was supposed to be the law. He brought me back. He said he was protecting me from the road. He said I should be grateful." She did not describe the nights. She did not describe the hands or the smell of stale whiskey and sweat. She did not have to. She described the cage, the way hope was rationed out until it was gone, and the way women were traded like cattle to settle gambling debts. "I am not a widow." "Noah," she whispered, finally looking at him. "And I am not a spinster. I was a commodity. I ran because I would rather die in the desert than be sold one more time." She braced herself. She waited for the look she had seen on the faces of the women in town, and the look she had seen in the eyes of the clerk at the mercantile. Disgust, pity that tasted like bile, judgment. But Noah did not look away. He sat perfectly still, his face carved from stone. The only sign of the storm raging inside him was his hands. They were clenched so tightly together that the knuckles were white, trembling with a violence he was physically restraining. He looked at her, and she saw something that made her breath catch. He did not look at her as if she were dirty. He looked at her as if she were a miracle. "You walked across the desert," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. "You outran horses. You survived that." "I had to," Elena said. Noah stood up. He walked to the fire and stared down into the flames. "There is no shame in surviving. Elena, the shame belongs to the men who made it necessary." He turned back to her, his eyes fierce. "You are not a commodity here. You are the woman who saved my calves in a flood. You are the woman who bakes bread in my kitchen. That is all you are." Elena felt a crack in the armor she had worn for so years. A single tear escaped, hot and fast, but she wiped it away before it could reach her chin. The storm broke 2 days later. They rode back to the ranch under a sky so blue it hurt to look at, the world buried under 2 feet of brilliant, blinding white. The ranch house was cold but standing. They fell back into their routine, but the air had changed. The secrets were gone, replaced by a raw, terrifying understanding. 3 days after their return, the dogs began to bark. Elena was in the kitchen, kneading dough. She looked out the window and saw 2 riders at the gate. They were not local men. They rode tall horses and wore long dusters, their hats pulled low. They did not look like cowboys. They looked like men who were paid to solve problems. Elena froze. Her hands, covered in flour, began to shake. She recognized the horse on the left. It was a roan with a white stocking, a horse she had seen tied outside the sheriff's office in the mining town. Noah was in the yard. He walked to the gate, not opening it, resting his arms on the top rail. Elena cracked the window just enough to hear, "Morning," one of the riders said. He had a smooth voice, the kind of voice that sounded reasonable while it was threatening you. "We are looking for a girl, family matter. Her uncle is worried sick about her." Noah did not move. "Is that so? Little thing," the rider continued. "Dark hair. Goes by Elena. We heard she might have come this way. I have not seen any girl," Noah said. The lie was smooth, delivered with the flat affect of a man who had nothing to hide. "I live here alone." The rider leaned forward, resting his hand on his saddle horn. "We heard otherwise. Friend, a man in town mentioned you bought boots for a woman, size 6. Noah shrugged. "I have a sister in Santa Fe. Sent them to her." The rider studied Noah for a long moment. His eyes flicked to the house, scanning the windows. Elena pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "If you see her," the rider said, his voice dropping an octave, "you tell her the uncle wants her back. He is a forgiving man, but he is impatient. We will be in the area for a while." They turned their horses and rode off slowly, not looking back. It was a promise, not a departure. Elena did not wait for Noah to come inside. She ran to her room. She dragged her old carpet bag from under the bed. Her hands were shaking so badly she could hardly fold her few dresses. Panic, cold and familiar, had seized her throat. "They found me," she whispered to the empty room. "They always find me." She waited until nightfall. The moon was hidden behind clouds, offering a small mercy of darkness. She packed her bag and slipped out the back door, heading for the barn. She would take the mare. She would leave a note. She would go south, maybe to Mexico, maybe to the end of the world. She opened the barn door, the hinges groaning softly in the cold air. Going somewhere? Noah was standing in the shadows near the tack room. He was not holding a weapon. He was just standing there, leaning against a support post, watching her. Elena gasped, dropping her bag. "Noah, I have to go. You heard them. I heard them," Noah said. He did not move to block her path. The door was wide open behind her. "They will burn this place down," Elena said, her voice rising in hysteria. "They will kill you! Noah, they do not care. You do not know them. I know their kind," Noah said calmly. "You do not," Elena snapped. She stepped toward him, fury mixing with her terror. "You are a good man. Noah, you think the world makes sense. You think if you stand your ground, people respect it. These men, they are wolves. I will not let them destroy your life. I will not be the reason you lose everything." Noah pushed off the post and walked toward her. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the steady rise and fall of his chest. "My life?" Noah asked. He looked around the barn, at the shadows and the empty stalls. "Elena, my life was destroyed 2 years ago. I buried my life on that hill." He looked at her, his gaze intense and vulnerable. "I have just been marking time since then. I have been a ghost walking around a dead house. You are the first thing that has been real in a long time. I am the one choosing what to build from the wreckage. Do not take that choice away from me." Elena trembled. "But I am broken. Noah, do you not understand? I am used. If I stay, if I let myself care—" She choked on the words, the deepest fear finally tearing itself loose. "If I let myself love you," she whispered, "I will be used again. I will be something taken, something discarded. I cannot survive being a thing again." Noah reached out, and this time he took her hands. His grip was warm and solid. "I will never take what you do not give," he said. He stepped closer, invading the space she had kept around herself for months. But he did not feel like a threat. He felt like a shield. "Your first time should matter," he said. Elena looked up, confused. "My first time? Noah, I told you. I know what you told me." Noah interrupted gently. "I'm not talking about biology, Elena. I'm talking about your soul. I'm talking about the first time you are truly chosen. The first time you are respected. The first time you are safe." He brought her hand to his chest, placing it over his heart. She could feel the steady, heavy beat of it through his shirt. "I am not asking to own you," he said. "I am asking to be with you. There is a difference." The words hung in the cold air, shimmering like heat. Your first time should matter. It was a rewriting of her history. It was an offer to erase the ledger and start a new book, one written in ink that she controlled. Elena looked at him, and the panic began to recede, replaced by a terrifying, beautiful hope. She stepped forward, closing the last inch of distance between them. She rested her forehead against his chest. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know," Noah said, his arms coming up to encircle her, holding her loosely, ready to let go if she pulled away. "I am too." They did not go back to the house immediately. The barn was cold, but the tack room was insulated and filled with the smell of hay and leather. Noah lit a lantern, turning the flame low until it was just a golden pulse in the darkness. Their intimacy did not begin with a rush of passion. It began with a question. Noah waited. He stood by the cot, his hands at his sides, letting her set the pace. Elena came to him. She reached up and unbuttoned his collar, her fingers brushing the warm skin of his neck. When he touched her, his hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a reverence that made her want to weep. He undressed her as if he were unwrapping something fragile and priceless. There was no grabbing, no demand. When she flinched, an old reflex, a ghost from the past, he stopped. He waited. He pressed his forehead to hers and breathed with her until the tension left her body. It was slow. It was a conversation without words, spoken in the language of skin and breath. For Elena, it was a revelation. She had known the act, but she had never known the feeling. She had never known the weight of a man's body could feel like a blanket instead of a cage. She had never known that a touch could ask a question instead of taking an answer. When they finally came together, it was not a conquering. It was a yielding, mutual and profound. It was the ache of being safe, the terrifying slide into vulnerability, the shock of pleasure that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with connection. Afterward, as the lantern flickered low and the shadows stretched long across the walls, the silence returned. But it was not empty. Elena lay curled against Noah's side, the rough wool of the blanket pulled up to their chins. She felt a pressure in her chest, a swelling tide that she could not stop. She began to cry. She cried for the girl who had run across the desert. She cried for the years she had lost. But mostly, she cried because for the first time in her life, she was naked and unashamed, and the arms holding her felt like a promise that would not break. Noah did not ask her to stop. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. He held her like it was an oath, his arm a steel band across her waist. "You are here," he whispered into the dark. "You are here, and you are mine, and I am yours." The morning brought the world back with a cold, hard clarity. Noah rose before dawn to check the stock. Elena lay in the warmth of the bed for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch, feeling a strange, new peace. But the peace was shattered when Noah returned to the house, his face grim. "Get dressed," he said. "What is it?" Elena asked, the fear sparking instantly in her belly. "Fresh tracks near the corral," Noah said. "They came back in the night. They cut the north fence, and my saddle, the good one, is gone." Elena sat up, clutching the sheet. "They are testing us." "Yes," Noah said. "They want to see if we will run, or if we will fight. They want to see if I am weak." He went to the gun cabinet and took out his revolver, checking the cylinder. "I am going to town. I am going to the sheriff." "I am coming with you," Elena said. Noah looked at her. "It might be dangerous." "I am done hiding in the house," she said. "If we are doing this, we are doing it together." They rode to the nearest county seat, a larger town than the one where they bought supplies. The sheriff's office was a brick building with a sturdy iron door. Sheriff Miller was a man with a thick mustache and eyes that smiled while the rest of his face remained still. He listened to Noah's report of the trespassing and the theft. He nodded sympathetically, leaning back in his chair. "A cut fence and a stolen saddle," Miller said, clucking his tongue. "That is a shame. Mr. Kincaid, truly a shame. We have had a lot of drifters moving through since the cold set in. Likely just some saddle tramp looking for a trade." "It was not a tramp," Noah said, his voice tight. "It was 2 men. They were at my house yesterday asking questions." "They are hired guns, Sheriff." Miller smiled that empty smile. "Now, Noah, that is a strong accusation. Hired guns, up here? Sounds like you have got an active imagination. Or maybe a guilty conscience." He looked past Noah to Elena, who stood by the door. His eyes lingered on her, and Elena felt a cold prickle of recognition. It was not that she knew him, but she knew the look. She knew the way he assessed her. "And who is this?" Miller asked. "This is Elena," Noah said. "She is with me." Miller nodded slowly. "Elena, pretty name. You know, I got a wire from a colleague over in the mining district. Said they were missing a girl named Elena. Said she was involved in some unsavory business, theft, breach of contract." Elena stepped forward. Her legs were shaking, but her voice was steady. "I owe no money, Sheriff, and I stole nothing but myself." Miller chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Well, now, that is a matter for the courts, isn't it? If these men come back, Mr. Kincaid, you let me know, but I would be careful making accusations. A man like you have a reputation to uphold. It would be a shame if folks started thinking you were harboring a fugitive." They walked out into the cold sunshine. Noah was vibrating with rage. "He is one of them," Noah said, his voice low and dangerous. "Or he is bought by them. He is not going to help us." Elena looked at the town, the busy street, the people walking by who knew nothing of the web that was tightening around them. "The net is wider than I thought," she said. "It is not just the mine boss. It is the law. It is the money. They are all connected." Noah stopped by the horses. He took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. "We cannot hide," he said. "If we go back to the ranch and wait, they will pick us apart. They will steal the stock, burn the hay, and wait for us to starve or leave. That is what predators do." He looked at Elena. "We have to be louder than they are. We have to scream." Elena looked at him. She thought of the shadows she had lived in for so long. She thought of the silence that had been her prison, The belief that if she was just quiet enough, she would be safe. It was a lie. Silence only protected the men who heard her. "What do we do?" she asked. "We find someone who is not bought," Noah said. "We go to the federal marshal. We make a statement. We put your name on a piece of paper that isn't a debt ledger. It will be dangerous," Elena said. "Once I speak, once I tell the truth, I cannot take it back. They will try to destroy me. They will say I am a whore. They will say I am a liar." Noah took her face in his hands. "Right there on the main street, ignoring the people walking by. Let them say what they want," he said, fierce and low. "You are not a lie, Elena. You are the truest thing I know." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, drawing strength from his touch. She opened them and looked at him. "Promise me," she said. "Anything. Don't let them turn me into a lie. Don't let them make me into just a story about a ruined woman." "I promise," Noah said. "We will write the story ourselves." He helped her onto her horse. They turned south, away from the ranch, away from the safety of the silence, riding toward a fight that would likely cost them everything, but which offered the only thing worth having, a life that was truly their own. The wind that scoured the high plains that week was not just cold, it was malicious. It carried the scent of coming snow and the heavier copper tang of impending violence. Noah Kincaid did not wait for the storm to break. He saddled his horse before dawn, the breath of the animal steaming in the lantern light, and rode out to find the few men in the territory who had not yet been bought. He rode first to the Circle T, a spread of rugged scrubland owned by Elias Thorne. Thorne was a man carved from old oak, with hands twisted by arthritis and a temper that had only sharpened with age. He hated the mining syndicate not for moral reasons, but because their runoff had poisoned his lower creek 3 years prior, killing 2 of his best brood mares. Thorne met Noah at the fence line, leaning heavily on a cane made of hickory. He listened to Noah's request for support, for men to stand witness, for eyes to watch the road without blinking. "It is not just about the girl, is it?" Thorne asked, his voice rasping like a file on iron. "It is about right and wrong," Noah said. Thorne spat into the dirt. "Right and wrong do not buy grain, Noah, but water does. You have got the only year-round creek in this basin that is not owned by the company. You think they are chasing a stray woman just for the principle of it?" Noah went still. He had thought of Elena as the target, and himself as the shield. He had not considered that the shield might be the prize. "They want the water," Thorne said, nodding at the realization on Noah's face. "The mine is expanding. They need water to process the ore. That girl is just the lever they are using to pry you off the land. If they break you, they get the deed. If they get the deed, they get the creek." Noah rode away with a new, cold understanding settling in his gut. Elena was not just a fugitive. She was leverage. He visited the Rivera family next. They ran a small herd of goats and cattle in the rough country to the west. Mateo Rivera, the patriarch, invited Noah into their small adobe home. His wife, Sophia, was a midwife who had brought half the county's children into the world and had stitched up just as many women after their husbands drank too much whiskey. "We have seen the men riding the perimeter," Mateo said quietly, pouring Noah a cup of strong, dark coffee. "They are not lawmen. They are pistoleros. I need to know who enters the valley," Noah said. "I cannot watch every road." "We will watch," Sophia said. She looked at Noah with dark, knowing eyes. "And you tell your Elena that if she bleeds, she comes to me. I have seen what men like that do to women. I know how to heal it, or at least how to help a woman survive the memory of it." Noah returned to the ranch with a network of eyes, but no guns. He would not ask his neighbors to die for him. The offer came 2 days later. Sheriff Miller rode out alone, stopping his horse at the main gate. He did not dismount. He sat comfortably, a thick wool coat buttoned to his chin, looking at the ranch house with the air of a man appraising merchandise. Noah walked out to meet him, his rifle held loosely in the crook of his arm. Elena watched from the shadowed slit of the kitchen window, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Afternoon?" "Noah," Miller called out. "Cold one today. State your business." Miller? Noah said. Miller smiled. That terrible, empty stretching of lips. Just bringing a friendly proposition. I have been talking to the interested parties. They are reasonable men. They understand a man has needs. They are willing to overlook certain irregularities. Noah waited. Give them the girl. Miller said. Simple as that. You hand her over to my custody. I will claim I found her wandering the desert, and the investigation into your affairs stops. No questions about the saddle, no cut fences, and... He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. The mine boss is willing to sign a document guaranteeing your water rights stay yours in perpetuity. As a gesture of gratitude, it was a transaction. A life for a deed, a woman's body for water. And if I refuse? Noah asked. Miller sighed, acting the part of the disappointed friend. Then things get difficult. A ranch is a fragile thing. Noah, cattle get sick, barns catch fire, men have accidents. It would be a shame to see a good man ruined over a piece of damaged goods. Get off my land, Noah said. Miller tipped his hat. Think on it. Noah, the offer expires when the snow flies. The next morning, the war began not with fire, but with blood. Noah found the herd scattered across the eastern pasture. The gate had been lifted off its hinges. In the center of the grazing land, 2 heifers lay dead. They had not been butchered for meat. They had been shot in the gut, left to bleed out slowly in the freezing mud. It was cruelty for the sake of a message. Noah stood over the carcasses, his breath smoking in the air. He did not shout. He felt a cold, crystalline rage hardening in his chest, turning his blood to ice. He rode back to the house, his face a mask of grim purpose. Elena saw his expression and knew before he spoke. They did something. They killed 2 cows. Noah said, because of me. Elena whispered. Because they are evil. Noah corrected her sharply. Do not take their sins and make them yours. But the town had already made its choice. When they rode in for supplies 3 days later, the silence was absolute. The blacksmith, a man Noah had known for 10 years, suddenly found he was too busy to sharpen a plowshare. The postmaster slid Noah's mail across the counter without meeting his eyes. At the general store. Noah placed his order for 50 pounds of flour and a keg of nails. The proprietor, Mr. Henderson, wiped his hands on his apron and looked at the wall. I cannot help you. Noah, he said. You have flour right there, Noah said, pointing to the stack. That is spoken for. Henderson lied. His voice was thin and reedy. The shipment did not come in. I have nothing for you, Mr. Kincaid. Noah looked around the store. Men he had traded with, men he had helped raise barns with, turned their backs. They studied the floorboards or the labels on tin cans. It was a shunning. Noah Kincaid had chosen a fallen woman over the town's peace. And now he was dirty too. Come on, Noah said to Elena. They walked out into the gray light. Elena felt the stairs burning into her back. She felt the weight of the town's judgment like a stone around her neck. That night, she packed her bag again. She moved silently in the dark, gathering her few dresses, the hairbrush Noah had bought her, the few dollars she had saved from her wages. She wrote no note this time. A note was an anchor. She needed to be a ghost. She opened the back door, the hinges well-oiled now, and stepped out into the biting wind. The snow had started to fall, small, hard flakes that hissed against the dry ground. Going to finish what they started? Noah was sitting on the porch swing. He was wrapped in a blanket, his rifle across his lap. He did not look surprised. Elena dropped her bag. Noah, please, I cannot do this. I cannot watch them bleed you dry. I cannot watch them look at you like you are a leper. You think leaving fixes it? Noah asked. He stood up, the blanket falling away. You think if you walk out that gate, Miller rides up and shakes my hand? You think the mine boss says, oh well, she is gone. Let us leave Mr. Kincaid alone? They want me, Elena cried. They want the water. Elena! Noah's voice cracked like a whip. He stepped off the porch and grabbed her shoulders, giving her a shake. Thorne told me, they want the creek. You are just the excuse. If you leave, I lose the leverage, but they will not stop. They will just find another way to break me. Elena stared at him, the snow catching in her eyelashes. It is about the land. It is about everything, Noah said. It is about the land and the water and the fact that they think they can take whatever they want. If you leave, you are not saving me. You are just handing yourself back to them. Is that what you want? To go back to that room? To that debt? Elena recoiled as if he had slapped her. No. Then we fight, Noah said. But we do not fight here, waiting for them to burn us out. We take the fight to them. Where? The county seat. Noah said. Prescott. There is a federal judge there, a district marshal. Miller's reach is long, but it is not infinite. We go there, and we file a formal complaint. We put it on the record. It is 100 miles, Elena said. In winter. Then we better dress warm, Noah said. They left before dawn the next day, leading a pack horse and riding their strongest mounts. They skirted the town, sticking to the old timber trails that wound through the foothills. The country was vast and indifferent, a landscape of gray rock and scrub oak dusted with snow. The journey was a brutal education in survival. The first night, the temperature dropped until the air felt like swallowed glass. They huddled together under a lean-to of pine boughs and canvas, sharing their body heat not out of desire, but out of necessity. Elena lay awake, listening to the wind in the trees. Sometime after midnight, the horses began to stamp and snort. Elena sat up, clutching Noah's arm. Hush, Noah whispered. He was already awake, his revolver in his hand, beyond the circle of their dying fire. Pairs of yellow eyes reflected the embers. Wolves. They were shadowing the camp, silent and patient. Elena felt the old terror rising, the feeling of being hunted. She went rigid, her breath hitching. Noah felt it. He did not tell her to calm down. He simply shifted his body, placing himself between her and the darkness. Keep the fire up, he said softly. I will watch. He watched all night. Elena fed the flames with trembling hands, forcing herself to move, to be useful. She saw the way the firelight played on Noah's face, the exhaustion, the determination. He was not a knight in a storybook. He was a man who was tired and cold, but who stayed awake because he had made a promise. On the third day, they reached the big sandy river. It was swollen with early runoff and ice melt, a churning ribbon of black water. There was no bridge. We have to swim it, Noah said, shouting over the roar of the water. Elena looked at the river. It looked like death. It looked like the dark, suffocating fear that had lived in her chest for years. I can't, she whispered. You can, Noah said. He brought his horse alongside hers. Look at me, Elena, not the water. Look at me. She looked at him. His eyes were steady. We go together, he said. I will be right downstream. If you slip, I catch you. Trust the horse. They entered the water. The cold was a physical shock, stealing the breath from Elena's lungs. Her horse scrambled, losing its footing on the slick river stones, then plunged into the deep channel. The water rose to Elena's waist, freezing and heavy, pulling at her skirts. For a moment, the river had her. The current twisted the horse, spinning them downstream. Elena gasped, water filling her mouth. She felt the panic seizing her limbs, the urge to let go, to surrender. Kick! Noah's voice roared through the spray. Elena! Kick him! The command cut through the panic. She kicked. She grabbed the horse's mane. She fought. The horse found purchase on a gravel bar and lunged forward, heaving itself up the muddy bank. They collapsed on the far side, coughing and shivering. Noah was there in an instant, pulling her from the saddle, wrapping her in a dry blanket from the oilskin pack. You did it, he said, rubbing her arms vigorously. You did it. Elena looked at the river, then at Noah. She was freezing, her teeth chattering so hard her jaw ached, but she felt a strange, fierce heat in her chest. She had not drowned. She had not surrendered. They arrived in Prescott 2 days later, a sprawling town of brick buildings and gas lamps that felt like a different world from the isolated ranch. They found a boarding house that did not ask questions and slept for 12 hours. The courthouse was a monument to bureaucracy, smelling of floor wax and stale cigar smoke. They waited 3 hours on a hard wooden bench before a clerk deigned to speak to them. Noah demanded to see the district judge. "You fill out the forms," the clerk said. "Board, you make a deposition. If the judge thinks it has merit, he will schedule a hearing." The process was a humiliation designed to grind people into dust. Elena sat in a small, windowless room while a legal clerk, a young man with ink-stained fingers and a sneer, took her statement. He did not call it a story. He called it testimony. He turned her pain into paperwork. "And you say you were confined?" the clerk asked, his pen scratching loudly. "Did you attempt to leave?" "I was threatened." Elena said, "But were you locked in? Were there chains?" "No chains," Elena said. "But the sheriff—" "Please stick to the facts. Miss Reyes, did you or did you not receive payment for your services?" Elena felt her face burning. The language he used, services, relations, arrangement, stripped the violence out of what had happened and made it sound like a business deal gone sour. He was making her sound like a whore who was angry about the price. Noah sat in the corner, his hat in his hands. He started to stand up, his face darkening. "Sit down, sir," the clerk snapped, "unless you want to be held in contempt." Noah swallowed his pride. It was a bitter pill. He sat back down, his eyes burning with helpless rage. He knew that one wrong word, one outburst, would give them the excuse they needed to dismiss Elena as a hysterical liar and him as a troublemaker. Then the door opened. A man walked in. He was dressed in a fine suit, with a gold watch chain across his vest. He carried a leather satchel. "Mr. Sterling," the clerk said, suddenly deferential. "I am here representing the mining concern," the man said smoothly. He looked at Elena with a gaze that was entirely devoid of warmth. "We understand there are some fanciful allegations being made. I am here to offer character witness testimony regarding this woman's time in the camp." He produced a document. "We have affidavits from 3 respectable citizens stating that Miss Reyes was a willing participant in the camp's nightlife, that she accrued significant gambling debts, that she is known to be a woman of loose morals and prone to fabrication." The clerk snickered. He actually covered his mouth and giggled. Elena felt the room shrinking. The walls were closing in. They were rewriting her life right in front of her. They were turning her into a lie, just as she had feared. She looked at Noah. He was white-knuckled, vibrating with the effort to not kill the man in the suit. She looked at the corner of the room. There sat a woman, a court stenographer, tapping away at a small machine. She was plain, middle-aged, with gray streaked in her hair. She had been invisible until now. The woman stopped typing. She looked up. Her eyes met Elena's. There was no judgment in them. There was a flicker of recognition, the shared language of women who have walked through fire. The stenographer gave a barely perceptible nod. It was small, but it was a lifeline. "I hear you," it said. "Speak." Elena took a breath. She sat up straighter in the hard chair. "Write this down," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear. The clerk looked annoyed. "I am the one asking the write it down," Elena repeated. She did not embellish. She did not use adjectives. She used verbs. On August 4th, Sheriff Miller told me that if I tried to board the stagecoach, he would arrest me for vagrancy. On September 10th, the mine foreman came to my room. I told him to leave. He broke the lock. He had a gun. He said the sheriff sent him. She listed the dates. She listed the names. She described the ledger book kept in the saloon safe. She described the kickbacks paid to the lawmen. She stripped the shame away and left only the cold, hard facts of corruption. "Mr. Sterling tried to interrupt. "This is preposterous. She is dictating a statement for the record." The stenographer said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the man's bluster. "The law says she may complete her statement," Elena finished. She looked the clerk in the eye. "I am not apologizing for surviving. I am not apologizing for running. And I am not lying." She signed the paper with a steady hand. They walked out of the courthouse into the late afternoon sun. Noah took her arm. "You were incredible," he said. I was terrified. Elena said, "That is why it was incredible." They turned down a side street toward the boarding house. The attack came without warning. 2 men stepped out from the alleyway. Rough men, smelling of stale beer and violence. They were not there to talk. One of them swung a heavy club, aiming for Elena. Noah moved. He did not think. He reacted. He threw himself across her path, taking the blow on his shoulder. The sound of wood hitting bone was a sickening crack. Noah grunted, staggering, but he did not fall. He swung his fist, a heavy, desperate blow that caught the attacker in the jaw, sending him stumbling back. The second man lunged with a knife. Noah grappled with him, shouting for Elena to run. Elena did not run. She saw the knife flash. She saw Noah stumble as his injured shoulder gave way. She saw a loose brick on the ground near the alley entrance. She grabbed the brick. She stepped forward and brought it down on the second attacker's arm with every ounce of strength she possessed. The man howled, dropping the knife. "Police!" someone shouted from the main street. The attackers, realizing the noise had drawn attention, turned and fled, disappearing into the labyrinth of alleys. Noah slumped against the brick wall, clutching his left arm. Blood was seeping through his coat sleeve where the knife had grazed him, but the angle of his shoulder looked wrong. "Noah," Elena said. She did not scream. She dropped the brick and was at his side instantly. "I am all right," he gasped, his face gray with pain. "You are not," Elena said. She stripped off her scarf and pressed it hard against the cut on his arm. "Hold this. Press tight." She guided him down to the sidewalk, making him sit. She checked his pupils. She checked the bone. "Your collarbone is broken," she said calmly. "And you have a deep laceration. We need a doctor. But first I need to stop this bleeding." She tore the hem of her petticoat, a ruin of good fabric, and bound the wound tight. She spoke to him constantly, her voice low and steady, anchoring him to consciousness. "Stay with me. Noah, look at me. That is it. You are safe. I have you." A crowd had gathered. A man with a tin star on his chest pushed through. It was not the local sheriff. It was a man with the hard, weary look of someone who has seen too much of the frontier. "What is this?" the man asked. "We were attacked," Elena said, standing up to face him. Her hands were covered in Noah's blood. "We just gave a deposition against the mining syndicate." This was their response. The lawman looked at the blood. He looked at the brick near Elena's feet. He looked at the courthouse. "I am Deputy Marshal Vance," he said, "federal jurisdiction." He looked at Noah, then back at Elena. "You say this is connected to a federal deposition?" "Yes," Elena said. "They are trying to silence us." Vance's expression hardened. "In my town? In front of my courthouse?" He turned to the crowd. "Get the doctor. Now." He looked back at Elena. "Miss, if you are willing to swear to that, I think we have just found a reason to open a federal inquiry. Noah was patched up in the doctor's office. His arm was in a sling, his face pale but determined." Elena sat beside him, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Vance stood by the door. "I have sent a telegram to the territorial governor," he said, "and I have issued warrants for the men you described. But these things take time. The wheels of justice turn slow. We cannot stay here," Elena said. Vance frowned. "It is safer here than out there. I can put you in protective custody." "No," Noah said. His voice was weak but firm. "If we stay, we are just sitting ducks waiting for them to try again. And if I am not at the ranch, they will destroy it. They will kill the stock. They will poison the water." He looked at Elena. "We have to go back." Elena looked at his broken wing. She looked at the blood that had dried under her fingernails. She thought of the ranch, the graves on the hill, the way the light hit the kitchen table in the morning. It was not just land. It was their home, and leaving it to the wolves was a form of dying. She took Noah's good hand. "We go back," she said. Vance shook his head. "You are walking into a war zone." "Maybe," Noah said, "but it is our ground, and we are done running." Love that hides isn't love, Elena thought, helping Noah stand. It is just fear in a nicer coat, and she was done with fear. She was ready to be the woman who swung the brick. "We leave at dawn," Elena said. They walked out of the doctor's office, battered, bloodied, but standing upright. They walked together, and this time, when the townspeople looked, they did not see a victim and a fool. They saw something dangerous. They saw two people who had decided that some things were worth bleeding for. The return to the ranch was not a homecoming. It was an arrival at a crime scene. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the world suspended in a stark, white silence that amplified every sound: the crunch of the horse's hooves, the creak of saddle leather, and the ragged breathing of Noah, who rode with his left arm bound tight against his chest. The pain in his broken collarbone was a dull, thumping rhythm that matched the beat of his heart, but his eyes were clear, scanning the horizon with the predatory focus of a man expecting an ambush. They rode through the main gate, which hung crookedly from a single hinge. The sign Noah had carved years ago, Kincaid, had been split down the middle, likely by an axe, the two halves swinging uselessly in the wind. Elena felt a cold stone settle in her stomach. She spurred her horse forward, passing Noah, driven by a frantic need to see the extent of the damage. The yard was a mess of scattered hay and overturned troughs. The barn doors stood wide open, flapping like broken wings. But it was the house that stopped her breath. The front door had been kicked in. Splintered wood jagged against the dark interior. Elena dismounted before her horse had fully stopped, her boots sliding in the slush. "Elena!" "Wait," Noah called out, his voice rough with pain. She did not wait. She walked up the steps and crossed the threshold. The kitchen, usually the warm heart of the house, had been gutted. The table where they had shared meals in silence was overturned. One leg snapped off. The flour bin had been upended, coating the floor in a white dust that looked mockingly like the snow outside. Jars of preserves, peaches and tomatoes she had canned with such careful pride, were smashed against the walls, their contents dripping like sweet, sticky blood. But the cruelty was specific. It was targeted. Elena walked to the small room Noah had given her. Her few dresses were pulled from the wardrobe and slashed to ribbons. The hairbrush Noah had bought her lay on the floor. The handle snapped in two. The small tin where she kept her saved wages was gone, but the pennies she had left on the bedside table were scattered across the quilt, as if to say her money was trash. It was not a robbery. It was a message. It was a violation designed to tell her that she owned nothing, that she was nothing, and that no walls could keep them out. Elena stood in the center of the room, her hands trembling. A wave of shame crashed over her, hot and suffocating. It was the old shame, the familiar voice that whispered she was poison, that she ruined everything she touched, that she had brought this destruction down on a good man's house. She felt a presence behind her. Noah stood in the doorway, his face gray with exhaustion, his good hand gripping the doorframe. He looked at the slashed dresses. He looked at the smashed window. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered, her voice shaking. "I am so sorry. Look what they did. Look what I brought you." Noah did not move to hug her. He did not offer soft words of comfort meant to smooth over the jagged edges of the moment. He stepped into the room, his boots crunching on the glass. "This is not on you," he said. His voice was low, vibrating with a deep, subterranean anger. "It is," Elena cried, turning to face him. "They did this to hurt me, to show me I am dirt. They did this because they are small men who fear things they cannot control," Noah said. He looked at the destruction not with despair, but with a terrifying clarity. "This is not a judgment on you, Elena. It is a confession of who they are." He kicked a piece of the broken chair aside. "You feel shame?" Noah asked. "You feel like this is your fault?" "Yes," she choked out. "Do not," Noah said. He looked her in the eye. "That is what they want. They want you to feel dirty so they can feel clean. Do not give it to them. What was done here was a sin, Elena, but it was not yours, and it will be answered." He turned and walked back to the kitchen, his boots heavy on the floorboards. "We have work to do," he said. They did not have long to wait. The word had spread. The attack in front of the courthouse in Prescott had been witnessed. and the telegraph lines had been busy. But news travels in different ways in the high country. It travels by riders on fast horses and by the smoke of signal fires. By noon, the Allies began to arrive. They did not come with fanfare. They came quietly, riding singly or in pairs. Men and women who had watched the mining syndicate eat the valley piece by piece and had finally decided that they were full. Elias Thorne was the first. The old rancher rode a mule that was as cantankerous as he was. He carried a double-barreled shotgun across his lap, his knuckles swollen and gnarled like tree roots. He looked at the broken gate and spat a stream of tobacco juice into the snow. "I heard you went to the feds," Thorne rasped as he dismounted. "I figured you might need another gun while you wait for the ink to dry." "Thank you, Elias," Noah said, standing on the porch. Then came the Riveras. Mateo drove a wagon, with Sophia sitting beside him, her face wrapped in a dark shawl. In the back of the wagon sat their 3 sons, young men with dark eyes and rifles resting easy on their knees. They did not say much. They simply nodded to Noah and began to move their wagon to block the northern approach to the yard, creating a defensive line. Sophia climbed down and walked straight to Elena, who was sweeping the flour from the kitchen floor. Sophia did not ask what happened. She took the broom from Elena's hands and pulled her into an embrace that smelled of sage and strong soap. "You breathe," Sophia commanded. "The men will watch the road. We will fix the house. By 2 o'clock. There were 12 people in the yard. It was a motley army, ranchers in worn coats, vaqueros with silver spurs, a blacksmith who held a hammer like a weapon of war. They were the people the town usually ignored, the people who did the work that kept the world turning. Then the snow began to crunch under the wheels of a buggy. It was not the mine boss's carriage. It was a heavy wagon, flanked by 6 riders. Leading them was Sheriff Miller, his tin star polished to a shine that looked obscene against the gray sky. Beside him rode a man in a fine fur coat, Carver, the mine boss himself. He had come to see the end of the show he had paid for. The posse pulled up 50 yards from the house. They saw the barricade of wagons. They saw Thorne leaning on the fence with his shotgun. They saw the Rivera boys on the roof of the barn. Sheriff Miller raised a hand. Halting his men, he looked confused. He had expected a broken man and a cowering woman. He had not expected a fortress. Noah stepped off the porch. He walked out to the center of the yard, stopping 10 paces from the sheriff's horse. He wore his good coat, though the left sleeve hung empty. His right hand rested near the revolver on his hip. "You are trespassing, Miller," Noah said. His voice carried clearly in the cold air. Miller laughed, though it sounded thin. "Trespassing? I am the law. Noah. You know that. I have a warrant here." He waved a piece of paper. "For who?" Noah asked. "For the woman," Miller said. "Elena Reyes, fugitive from justice, theft, prostitution, inciting a riot." He looked past Noah to the house. "Send her out, Kincaid. Do not make this a bloodbath. You have got good people here. Do not get them killed for a whore." The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Elena was standing in the doorway. She heard it. Every instinct she had screamed at her to hide, to run, to bury herself in the dark where the names couldn't reach her. The weight of the eyes, the posse, the neighbors, the Riveras, felt crushing. She was the cause of this. She was the stain. Then Noah turned. He did not look at the sheriff. He looked at her. He extended his good hand, palm open. It was an invitation. It was a challenge. Elena took a breath. She smoothed the front of her torn dress. She walked down the steps. She walked across the frozen mud. She did not stop until she was standing right beside Noah, her shoulder brushing his arm. She looked up at Miller. She did not look down. "I am right here," she said. Miller sneered. "There she is. The cause of all this trouble? You got a lot to answer for. Girl, she is not answering to you," Noah said. He stepped slightly forward, placing his body partially in front of hers. Not to hide her, but to claim her. She is not answering to a man who sells his badge to the highest bidder. Carver, the mine boss, leaned forward in his saddle. He was a thick-set man with a face like a bulldog, wrapped in expensive wool. "Enough of this." Carver barked. "Sheriff, arrest her. If these people interfere, shoot them. They are obstructing justice." The deputies shifted, hands moving to their guns. Thorne cocked both hammers of his shotgun. The sound was loud and dry, like a branch snapping. "Hold!" A voice roared from the road behind the posse. A lone rider galloped into the clearing, his horse lathered and blowing hard. He wore a badge that was not tin, but silver. It was Deputy Marshal Vance. Vance pulled his horse up hard, spraying snow. He looked at the sheriff, then at Carver, then at the armed line of ranchers. "Lowering your weapons," Vance shouted. "I am Deputy Marshal Vance, United States Federal Court." Sheriff Miller's face went pale. He lowered his hand. "Deputy," he stammered, I did not know you were in the territory. We're just executing a warrant." "Let me see it," Vance demanded. Miller hesitated, then handed the paper to the marshal. Vance read it, his expression tightening with disgust. "This warrant is signed by a judge who was indicted for fraud 3 days ago." Vance said. He crumpled the paper and dropped it into the snow. "It is garbage, as is your authority here. Miller." Carver's face turned a violent shade of red. "Now see here, Marshal, this is a local matter. This woman is a menace. This woman is a federal witness," Vance said coldly. "And you, Mr. Carver, are a suspect in a conspiracy investigation involving bribery, extortion, and attempted murder." The silence that followed was absolute. The wind whistled through the gaps in the barn. Carver looked at Vance, then at Noah, then at the line of armed neighbors. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his life, that his money had hit a wall it could not breach. But men like Carver do not surrender. They escalate. "I do not care about your papers," Carver shouted, his composure shattering. "I own this valley. I bought and paid for every inch of it." He looked at his hired men. "Kill them. I will pay double. Kill them all." Most of the deputies hesitated. They were hired guns, but they were not suicidal, and shooting a federal marshal was a hanging offense. But Miller was desperate. He knew that if he was taken in cuffs, he would hang anyway. He saw the end of his life approaching, and he panicked. Miller's hand dropped to his holster. "No!" Noah shouted. The moment broke like thunder. Miller drew fast, leveling his pistol not at Vance, but at Elena, the source of his ruin. Noah moved. He did not have time to draw. He slammed his body into Elena, knocking her sideways into the snow just as Miller's gun cracked. The bullet tore through the air where Elena had been standing. Then the yard erupted. Thorne fired one barrel of his shotgun into the air, the boom shaking the ground. The Rivera boys fired warning shots near the hooves of the deputies' horses. But Vance was a professional. He did not fire a warning shot. He drew his Colt and fired once. Calm and precise. The bullet struck Miller in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to his knees. The sheriff's gun flew from his hand, landing in the slush. Carver, seeing his enforcer fall, grabbed a rifle from his saddle scabbard. He swung it toward Vance. Noah was on one knee, pain blinding him from the impact of the fall. He saw Carver leveling the rifle. He saw Vance's horse rearing, blocking the marshal's aim. Noah drew his revolver with his right hand. He did not think about the years of peace he had tried to keep. He did not think about the graves on the hill. He thought only that if he did not act, the law would die in his yard. He exhaled. He squeezed the trigger. The shot was deafening. Carver jerked back as if pulled by an invisible rope. Noah's bullet struck him in the chest. He slumped over the neck of his horse, the rifle sliding harmlessly to the ground, before sliding out of the saddle to land in a heap of fur and failure. "Stop!" Vance bellowed. "Cease fire!" The shooting stopped as quickly as it had begun. The smoke hung low and blue over the yard, smelling of sulfur and death. The deputies threw their hands up, dropping their weapons into the snow. They looked at Carver's body, then at the grim line of ranchers. The fight had gone out of them. Miller was groaning in the snow, clutching his shoulder. Elena scrambled over to Noah. "Noah, are you hit?" Noah shook his head. holstering his gun with a trembling hand. No, just the arm. He looked at Carver's body. He felt no triumph. He felt only a sickness in his gut, a heavy, leaden weight. He had killed a man. It had been necessary, but it was a weight he would carry. Vance dismounted, walking over to check Carver. He stood up and shook his head. He is dead. He walked over to Miller, hauled him up by his good arm, and slapped a pair of iron cuffs on his wrists. "Sheriff Miller, you are under arrest for attempted murder and corruption." The neighbors slowly lowered their weapons. There was no cheering. There were no hats thrown in the air. There was just the sound of the wind returning to fill the silence. Elena stood up. She looked at the townspeople who had ridden in the posse, men she recognized from the mercantile, from the livery. They would not meet her eyes. Some looked at the ground. Some looked at the dead man. They looked ashamed, small, and suddenly very ordinary. She walked over to Miller. The sheriff looked up at her, his face gray with pain and shock. He expected her to spit on him. He expected her to curse him. Elena just looked at him. She looked at the man who had terrified her for years, the monster in her nightmares, and she saw that he was just a frightened, greedy man bleeding in the snow. "I told you," she said quietly. "I am not a lie." She turned her back on him. The aftermath was a blur of motion that felt distant to Elena. Vance took charge, organizing the transport of the prisoners and the body. The neighbors stayed to help right the overturned troughs and fix the gate. Sofia Rivera made coffee in the wrecked kitchen, sweeping aside the broken glass. By sunset, the yard was empty again. The dead were gone. The law had ridden away. Elena sat on the porch steps, watching the sun dip below the mountains. She felt exhausted, a bone-deep weariness that made her limbs feel like lead. She had expected to feel triumphant. She had expected to feel a soaring sense of victory. Instead, she felt hollow. She felt a strange, aching grief. The man who had tormented her was dead. The sheriff was in chains. But it didn't give her back the years she had lost. It didn't unbreak the china in the kitchen. It didn't erase the memory of the cage. Justice was necessary, she realized. But justice was cold. It balanced the scales, but it did not heal the wound. The screen door creaked. Noah came out. He had taken off his coat. His shirt was white against the gathering dark. He sat down beside her, moving stiffly. He did not speak for a long time. He just sat there, breathing the same cold air, watching the same purple sky. "It is over," he said finally. "Is it?" Elena asked. "The fighting is over," Noah said. "The rest, the remembering, that takes longer." He reached out and took her hand. His skin was rough, warm, and alive. Elena looked at their joined hands. She saw the scars on his knuckles. She saw the tremor in her own fingers. "We ruined your house," she said softly. "We can fix the house," Noah said. "Wood and nails are cheap." He turned to look at her. The harshness had gone out of his face, leaving only a quiet, steady devotion. "You stayed," he said. "You stood up. You stood beside me." Elena said, "I will always stand beside you." Noah said, "That is the only place I want to be." Elena squeezed his hand. The hollowness began to fill, not with triumph, but with something slower and more enduring. It filled with the realization that she did not have to run tomorrow. She did not have to hide. She looked at the ranch, the broken gate, the dark windows, the land that had been fought for and bled on. It was not a fairy tale kingdom. It was a place of work and dust and hard winters. But it was theirs. "Let us go inside," Elena said. "It is getting cold." They stood up together. They did not walk into the sunset. They turned and walked into the house, stepping over the threshold to light the lamp, to sweep the floor, and to begin the long, ordinary work of building a life that was real. The spring thaw arrived not with a whisper, but with the heavy, wet sound of a world waking up from a long sickness. The snow, which had covered the Kincaid ranch like a shroud for 4 long months, began to retreat. It pulled back from the ridges first, exposing the dark, iron-rich earth then receded from the pastures, leaving behind a landscape of mud that was thick enough to pull the boot off a careless man. But beneath the mud, the grass was coming. It pushed up through the slush, a vibrant, violent green that smelled of life and stubbornness. The creek, which had been a frozen ribbon of silence, was now a roaring torrent of brown water, carving new banks and carrying the debris of winter down toward the river. Elena stood on the porch, watching the sunrise. The air was cold, but it no longer carried the bite of frost. It smelled of wet sage and warming soil. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, not because she was shivering, but because the comfort of the wool felt grounding. She looked different than she had when she first stumbled onto this land. The hollows in her cheeks had filled in, though her face retained the sharp, watchful angles of a survivor. Her hands, resting on the porch railing, were rougher now, calloused from the washboard and the rains, but they were steady. Noah was already out by the corral. He was repairing the fence that the sheriff's men had cut during the siege. He worked slowly, favoring his left shoulder where the collarbone was knitting back together, but he worked steadily. He was replacing the cut wire with new, double-strand barb. He was not just fixing a fence. He was stitching the ranch back together. "We need supplies," Noah said later that morning, coming into the kitchen and stomping the mud from his boots. "The flour is low, and we need seed if we are going to plant the south acre." Elena looked up from the ledger she'd been balancing. "I will go," she said. Noah hesitated. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the steam rising around his face. "You do not have to. I can send one of the Rivera boys. I am not hiding." "Noah," Elena said. She closed the ledger with a soft thud. "If I hide, they think they won. I will go." They hitched the wagon 2 hours later. The road to town was a quagmire, the wheels slicing deep into the sludge, the horses straining against the collars. When they rolled onto the main street, the town looked the same as it always had: false-fronted buildings, dusty windows, men loitering on the boardwalks. But the atmosphere had shifted. As the wagon passed, the silence was not the hostile, heavy silence of the winter. It was a sheepish, averted-eye silence. Men who had stood in the posse, holding guns against their neighbors, suddenly found great interest in the toes of their boots or the clouds in the sky. Noah stopped the wagon in front of the mercantile. He reached for Elena's hand to help her down, but she was already climbing down on her own, her boots landing squarely in the dirt. They walked into the store. The bell above the door chimed, a bright, cheerful sound that seemed at odds with the tension in the room. "Mr." Henderson was behind the counter. When he saw them, he went pale, then flushed a mottled red. "Mr. Kincaid," Henderson said, his voice cracking slightly. "Miss Reyes." Elena walked to the counter. She did not shrink. She did not look at the floor. She took a list from her pocket and placed it on the wood. "We need 50 pounds of flour," Elena said. 10 pounds of sugar, coffee, and seed corn. Henderson looked at the list, then at Elena. His hands were shaking as he reached for a pencil. "Of course, right away. I have a new shipment of calico, if you are interested. Very fine quality." He was trying to make amends with fabric. He was trying to bury his cowardice under a sales pitch. Elena looked at him. "No, thank you." "Mr. Henderson, just what is on the list?" As she waited, a woman approached her. It was Mrs. Miller, the baker's wife, a woman who had once pulled her skirts aside when Elena walked past. She stopped 3 feet away, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. "Miss Reyes," the woman said. Her voice was thin. Elena turned. "Yes, I wanted to say—" The woman paused, looking around to see who was watching. "I wanted to say that we did not know about the sheriff, about everything. It is a terrible thing. What happened? It was an apology, but it was a weak one. It was an apology that tried to claim ignorance as a virtue." "You knew enough," Elena said quietly. "You knew I was a human being. That should have been enough." The woman flinched. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She nodded once, stiffly, and walked away. Elena watched her go. She felt no triumph. She felt no anger. She simply felt clear. She accepted the flour and the seed from Henderson, checking the tally on the bill to ensure he had not cheated them, and paid with the coins Noah handed her. When they walked back out to the wagon, Noah was smiling. It was a small smile, barely lifting the corners of his mustache. But it was there. "You are tough on them," he said as he lifted the flour sacks into the bed. "I am fair," Elena said. "I do not want their pity, Noah, and I do not need their friendship. I just need them to know that I am still standing." They drove home under a high, blue sky. The world felt vast and indifferent. But for the first time, that indifference felt like freedom. Back at the ranch, life settled into a rhythm that was defined by work and the slow, quiet building of trust. Elena took over the books completely. She had a mind for numbers that she had hidden for years, a sharp, analytical intelligence that saw patterns in the price of grain and the weight of the calves. One evening, she sat at the kitchen table, the lamp casting a golden circle over the papers. Noah was by the fire, mending a bridle. "Noah," Elena said, "you are overpaying the feed supplier in Tucson. He is charging you for shipping twice on the invoices from January." Noah looked up. "Is he?" Elena pointed to the column of figures. "See here and here." He added the freight charge to the subtotal, then added it again at the bottom. Noah stood up and walked over, leaning over her shoulder to look at the ledger. He smelled of leather and wood smoke. "I never noticed," he admitted. "I just paid the bill. You have been losing $4 a month," Elena said. "I will write to him. We will deduct it from the next order." Noah looked at her, and the look in his eyes made her heart stumble. It was not just affection. It was respect. He was not looking at a woman he had saved. He was looking at a partner who was saving him right back. "You are good at this," he said. "I had to be." Elena said, Before, if I did not count every penny, I did not eat." Noah put his hand on her shoulder. His touch was warm and heavy. "Well, you are eating now, and you are saving us money." It was a small moment, but it shifted the ground beneath them. Elena was no longer just the woman Noah was protecting. She was the woman who kept the ranch running. She was essential. The legal proceedings dragged on with the agonizing slowness of a glacier. Deputy Marshal Vance stopped by every few weeks, bringing updates that were heavy with legal jargon. There were depositions to be signed. There were affidavits to be sworn. "They are trying to delay," Vance told them one afternoon. Sitting on the porch with a glass of lemonade, "The mine syndicate has expensive lawyers. They think if they drag this out, you will get tired. They think you will run out of money or patience." "Let them think that," Noah said. "We are not going anywhere." Elena sat through the questioning with a stone-faced calm. When the lawyers from the city came to question her character, asking about her time in the mining camp with sneering insinuations, she did not cry. She did not shout. "I did what I had to do to survive," she told them, her voice steady. "If you want to judge someone, judge the men who bought and sold women like cattle. Judge the sheriff who took a cut of the profits." Her testimony was a rock that broke the wave of their accusations, and slowly, the tide began to turn. The deputy marshal confirmed that the charges against the former Sheriff Miller would stick. The corruption was documented. The paper trail was undeniable. It did not fix everything. It did not give back the years Elena had lost, but it drew a line in the dirt. It said that in this valley, at least, the law was no longer a weapon for the rich. One Sunday, when the work was done and the air was soft with the scent of blooming wildflowers, Elena walked up the rise behind the house. She opened the small iron gate and stepped into the family plot. 2 markers stood there, weathered by the wind. Sarah Kincaid, beloved wife, and a smaller one, Thomas Kincaid, 3 days old. Elena stood there for a long time. She had avoided this place, afraid that her presence would be an insult to the dead. She was the woman who had come after. She was the woman with the stained past. She heard Noah's boots on the grass. He stopped beside her, taking off his hat. She liked the view from here, Noah said. His voice was raw, stripped of its usual reserve. She said you could see the weather coming a day away. "Tell me about her," Elena said. Noah looked at the headstone. She was quiet. He said, "Not like me." She hummed when she cooked. She was soft. The world was too hard for her. I think when the fever came, she just faded. It was like watching a candle burn down. He swallowed hard, his throat working. And the boy, he never really took a breath. He just sighed and was gone. After they died, I stopped living. I just kept moving my hands and feet because I did not know how to stop. He looked at Elena. There were tears in his eyes, unspilt and shining. I thought I was dead too. Elena, until you ran into my fence. Elena turned to him. She did not try to offer platitudes. She did not try to tell him it was God's will. She knew better. I cannot be her, Elena said. I am not soft. Noah, I have sharp edges. I do not want you to be her, Noah said. He reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. I want you. I am here, Elena said. She squeezed his hand. It was a promise. I am here. That night, the nightmare came again. It was always the same. She was back in the room above the saloon. The door was locked. The heavy footsteps were coming down the hall. She was trapped, and the walls were closing in, smelling of stale beer and fear. Elena woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright in the bed, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was sweating, tangled in the quilt. Noah was there instantly. He did not startle. He did not ask what was wrong. He knew. Elena, he said softly. He reached out and placed a hand on her back. He did not grab her. He just offered the weight of his hand as an anchor. You are at the ranch, he said. The door is locked from the inside. I am here. Elena trembled, pressing her face into her hands. It felt so real. I know, Noah said, but it is a memory. It cannot hurt you now. He pulled her down against him. She curled into his side, fitting her body against the solid warmth of his chest. He smelled of soap and sleep. The rhythm of his breathing was slow and steady, a counterpoint to her racing heart. She listened to his heart beating. It was a sound of life. It was a sound of safety. Hold me, she whispered. Always, Noah said. He held her until her breathing matched his. He held her until the dawn light began to turn the window gray. This intimacy, this waking in the night, this sharing of fear was deeper than any physical act. It was the intimacy of being known. It was the safety of being seen, broken pieces and all, and being held together. As summer approached, the last threat arrived. It came not with guns, but with a letter. A writer from the city delivered it, a thick envelope sealed with wax. It was from a law firm in San Francisco, representing the investors of the mining syndicate. Elena opened it at the kitchen table. Noah stood behind her, his hand on the back of her chair. It was a final attempt at intimidation. It spoke of countersuits. It spoke of character defamation. It suggested that if Miss Reyes were to withdraw her testimony, a generous settlement could be arranged to help her relocate to a new territory. It was a bribe wrapped in a threat. It was a suggestion that she should take the money and disappear, that she should go back to being a ghost. Elena read it twice. Then she stood up. She walked to the stove, where the breakfast fire was still burning low. What does it say? Noah asked. It says they are afraid, Elena said. She opened the iron door of the stove. She tossed the letter onto the coals. They watched the paper curl. The wax seal melted, running like red tears. The heavy legal language blackened and turned to ash. They want me to leave, Elena said. They want to buy my silence. And? Noah asked. Elena picked up the poker and stirred the ashes, ensuring nothing remained. I am not for sale, she said. And I am done running. She turned to Noah. Her face was set in lines of determination. We are going to plant the South Acre, she said, and we are going to fix the barn roof, and we are going to live here. Noah, right in front of their eyes. Noah smiled. It was a full smile this time. Reaching his eyes, yes, he said, we are... That evening, they sat on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent, beautiful streaks of orange and purple. The land stretched out before them, vast and rolling, the sagebrush turning silver in the twilight. They talked about the future. It was a strange conversation for two people who had spent so long just trying to survive the day. The Rivera boy, Mateo's youngest cousin, needs a place, Noah said quietly. His parents died in the fever last winter. He is 12. He is a good kid, but he needs a home. Elena looked at him. She thought of the empty room in the house. She thought of the love she had been afraid to give, fearful it would be used against her. We have room, she said. He will need schooling, Noah said. And he eats like a horse. We have plenty of flour, Elena said. And I can teach him his numbers. Noah looked at her. Are you sure? It is a lot to take on. Elena looked out at the darkening hills. She thought of the graves on the hill. She thought of the silence that had filled the house for so long. A house needs noise. Noah, she said, it needs life. We cannot just guard the perimeter forever. We have to build something inside the fences. Noah reached out and took her hand. We will bring him over on Sunday. The story closed with the landscape wide and unforgiving, the mountains standing as silent sentinels against the night. It was a hard country. It killed the weak and broke the careless. But on the porch of the ranch house, two figures sat close together. They were not perfect. They carried scars that would ache when the weather turned cold. They carried memories that would wake them in the night. But they were there. Elena leaned her head on Noah's shoulder. She watched the first stars appear, piercing the veil of the dusk. She thought about her life. She thought about the first time she had been taken, the first time she had been sold, the first time she had realized that the world saw her as a thing to be used. Those were the first times that had defined her for so long. But they were not the ones that mattered. The first time that mattered was the moment Noah had looked at her in the dust and asked for her name, not her price. The first time that mattered was when he had stood between her and the mob and said, "She is not answering to you." It was the first time she had been chosen, not as a possession, but as a person, not as a victim, but as a partner. Your first time should matter, he had said. And he was right. It wasn't the first time she had been touched that defined her. It was the first time she had been loved. And that, she realized as the night settled over the land they had claimed, changed everything. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope the journey of Elena and Noah resonated with you. It has been a privilege to share this tale of resilience, justice, and the healing power of love in the American West. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below and share your location. And if this story touched you, I encourage you to subscribe to From Wild West for more tales from the frontier. Please share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every one of them. Until next time, keep your fences strong and your heart open.